Hi, welcome to another lecture on modification of the legends in ggplot2. Now, we want to use another scale layered function in order now to map the aesthetic shape to a categorical variable. Now, let's see what we mean by that. Say we come in here, we use this data. This is for demonstration purposes. And then we're going to use, now, we want the relationship between displacement and miles per gallon. So let's run this. Now, let's say we come in here and we want to shape these points using this vector. And if you run this, now, what you're seeing here is that this scatterplot has went ahead and shaped the points by this variable, which we converted to a vector. Now, let us start. Now, before we use scale shape manual function, what I want to do is I want to first increase these points, so the size of these points. So I'm going to come in here and say size, let's say 2. Try to make them to be much clearer. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to change the name in this legend and change the shape of these points. Remember now our aesthetic shape. Okay, so we also want to change the shapes. Now, if we come in here and you say scale shape manual, all right. Now, if we want to change the name, we're gonna come and say cylinders. Now, what happens if you want to change also the shape? Okay, now let's say we pass in values. Okay, and now we pass in a vector specifying that when the number of cylinders is 4, I want the shape to be shape of type 4. Then it's a shape of type 12 or also 24. Let's run this. Now, if you can remember, when we're changing the shapes, when you specify 24, for example, we have triangles. Okay, so now when you specify values, you are simply just changing the shapes in this legend. Okay, so we have to specify 3 different shapes. So that is what we have done when we used values arguments. We supplied a numeric vector of shapes. We can also come in here and modify the labels argument. Okay, and when we pass in here, remember it was 4, then it's 6, then it's 8. So if you run this, you notice we have managed to label this legend according to our own desire. So in most cases, this makes it easier to interpret for the end users of the plot. When we also want to limit ourselves into, say, for example, we only want to focus on the number of cylinders, which is 4 and 6. So in that case, we can go ahead and modify the limit argument. Now, when it comes to values, remember, it's the shape of these points in the scatter plot. Now, let's say we want to limit ourselves to only, so I'm going to come in here and say limits, so you will see how do we modify this. So now we're going to limit to ourselves to the number of cylinders, which is 6 and 8. So when we come in here, what we need to do when it comes to the labels, we also have to come in here and modify this and remove this 4. Also, remember that when shape, the value of the shape equals 4, we were representing the number of cylinders, which is 4. So we also have to come in here and remove this because we want only 6 and 8. So let's run this. Now, what you are seeing here is ggplot2, as usual, is also telling us that it has removed the rows that represented or that are related to 4 cylinders. So that is what has happened. But we can see that we've managed to label our legend very well because we only wanted 6 and 8. And also the shape is corresponding as well as the labels. Now, what about breaks? So we can also come in here and specify breaks, and then we pass in 6 and 8. So if we run this here is also producing the same output. And also what you can see is that ggplot will also give us a warning message to specify that these set of points that correspond to the 4 number of cylinders, they have been removed because we have specified breaks as well as limits. So that is how you can modify the shapes